Before we talk about the moment that changed everything, let's go back to where it all began. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, nothing special, nothing worth remembering. The kind of day that slips through your memory without leaving a mark. The store was busy, aisles filled with quiet chatter and the soft hum of checkout machines. People stood in line, half lost in their own thoughts, eyes on their phones, minds elsewhere. No one expected anything unusual to happen. Among them was a woman, tired, gentle and visibly pregnant. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Her patience showed on her face, the quiet kind that comes from carrying both hope and exhaustion. Behind her stood a man who looked like he'd run out of patience long ago. He tapped his foot, checked his watch, sighed loudly, just enough for everyone to hear. Each second felt heavier than the one before, his frustration growing like a storm ready to break. And just a few steps back, unnoticed by most, stood someone else. A soldier, calm, steady, eyes watchful but quiet. He wasn't there to be a hero. He was just another person in line. Until the moment came when silence was no longer an option. Before we talk about the moment everything changed, we need to understand how ordinary that day truly was. Because that's the thing about life, the biggest turns often come when everything seems perfectly still. It was a quiet afternoon in a small-town grocery store, the kind of place where the air always smelled faintly of fresh bread and cleaning spray. The automatic doors opened and closed with a soft hiss, letting in the cold wind from outside and the low murmur of people going about their routines. There were mothers with shopping carts full of cereal boxes and diapers. An old man flipping through a newspaper near the entrance, pretending to read but mostly just passing time. A teenager stocking shelves, earbuds in, half dancing to a beat only he could hear. The hum of conversation was gentle, unremarkable, just the sound of another day. At the checkout, the line moved slowly. Each beep of the scanner echoed in the air, marking the rhythm of the moment. People waited in silence, some tapping their feet, others scrolling through their phones, their faces lit up by screens and boredom. No one was in a rush, but no one was happy to wait either. And then there she was. A woman standing quietly about halfway down the line. You could tell at a glance that she was pregnant, 7 months along, maybe more. Her hands cradled her belly in that instinctive, protective way that mothers do without even realizing. She carried only a few things, a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, some fruit. Nothing heavy, but even that seemed like too much for her tired arms. Her face had a calmness to it, a kind of gentle patience that comes from knowing life inside you depends on your calm. Every movement she made was slow, careful, her breathing deep, steady. She smiled politely at the cashier, even though she hadn't reached the front yet, a small, almost invisible act of kindness. The kind that goes unnoticed in crowded places, but behind her, the air was different. It shifted, slightly, but enough to feel it. The sound of tapping shoes began, sharp against the tile. A sigh followed, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A man stood there, tall, restless, and visibly annoyed. He crossed his arms, checked his watch, then checked it again as if that would somehow make time move faster. Every little delay seemed to scrape against his nerves. He looked around, muttering something under his breath, his face twisted in that impatient way people get when the world doesn't move at their pace. And while everyone else kept their eyes forward, pretending not to notice, his irritation spread, quiet but infectious. The kind of energy that fills a room and makes people uncomfortable, though no one wants to admit it. The pregnant woman didn't turn around. Maybe she felt it. Maybe she didn't. Or maybe she was just too tired to care. The line moved an inch forward. The cashier greeted another customer with the same tired smile she'd used 100 times that day. Nothing about this moment seemed special. Nothing at all. But that's the thing about ordinary days. They can change in an instant. Further down the line, someone stood silently unnoticed. He was dressed simply, in jeans and a plain jacket, a few scars faintly visible on his knuckles. His posture was straight, his stance relaxed but firm. You could tell, even without knowing him, that discipline was in his bones. He didn't scroll through his phone. He didn't fidget or sigh. He just waited, quietly observing everything around him. The soldier. That's what he was, though no one there knew it yet. To everyone else, he was just another man in line, another stranger in the crowd. His eyes moved from person to person, not suspiciously, just aware. He noticed the way the pregnant woman shifted her weight every few seconds, the way her hand pressed against her lower back as if to relieve the ache. He noticed the man behind her, how his shoulders tensed each time the line stopped. He noticed and remembered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the glass doors. A child cried in one of the aisles. Someone dropped a can and the dull metallic clang echoed across the store. Small, meaningless sounds, yet somehow, they filled the silence between the breaths of everyone waiting. The woman in line adjusted her scarf, her eyes glancing at the register, counting how many people were left ahead of her. Her lips moved slightly, maybe whispering to the baby, maybe just breathing out a prayer that she could sit soon. The man behind her sighed again, this time louder. And though she didn't look back, the faint crease that appeared on her forehead said she'd heard him. Another minute passed. Another beep from the scanner, another shift in weight. And then, without anyone realizing it, tension began to build. Not from shouting or chaos, but from the silence that followed the man's growing impatience. It hung there, thick and heavy, waiting for something to break it. The soldier could feel it too. Years of training had tuned his instincts, the ability to read a situation before it unfolded. He'd seen that look before, in places far away from home. That mix of frustration, ego, and carelessness, the kind that always led to someone getting hurt. He didn't move. Not yet. He simply waited, calm but ready, like a wave just before it rises. The store, the people, the noise, it all blurred into background hum. Because in the middle of that ordinary afternoon, the stage was quietly being set. Every small action, every sigh, every glance was leading toward a single moment. One that no one could see coming, and soon that moment would arrive. Before we talk about the shove, let's pause for a second. Right in that quiet space before everything goes wrong. You know that feeling when the air changes? When something invisible in the room starts to tighten and you can sense it before it happens. That was the air in the store. Thick. Waiting. The man behind her wasn't just impatient anymore. He was irritated beyond reason. His sighs turned into muttered curses, his eyes darting at the cashier, at the people ahead, and back to the woman in front of him. He drummed his fingers against the cart, faster each time the line didn't move. No one looked directly at him, but everyone could feel him, like static before a storm. The woman stayed still, unaware, or maybe choosing to ignore it. She took another small step forward, one hand gently on her belly, steadying herself as she waited. The soldier, a few spots back, noticed it, the rhythm of anger building. His eyes narrowed slightly. Not in challenge, but in quiet awareness. He'd seen men lose control before. They all looked the same just before it happened. Eyes glazed with frustration, reason slipping away one heartbeat at a time. Then it happened. Not with a warning, not with words, just movement. The man leaned forward, muttered something harsh under his breath and shoved her. It wasn't a light nudge. It was the kind of push that comes from anger you think no one will stop. The woman stumbled forward, her groceries slipping from her hands. An apple rolled across the floor. The carton of milk tipped sideways and burst open, white liquid spreading like a slow wave on the tiles. She caught herself on the counter, barely, her face pale with shock, lips parting but no sound coming out. For a few seconds the world went silent. Even the cashier froze, the scanner light blinking over and over with no beep. The hum of the refrigerators in the back became the only sound in the room. Then came a single, sharp gasp, someone near the middle of the line. And like that, everyone realized what they'd just seen. The man straightened his jacket and spat out words that sliced through the quiet. Maybe try moving faster next time. The woman blinked, her breath shaking. Her hands trembled as she reached for the spilled items, but her body seemed frozen between shock and disbelief. Her face turned away slightly, not in shame, but in that helpless way people do when they can't understand how cruelty can arrive so suddenly. And around her, the store changed. People looked, and then looked away. Some lowered their eyes to their phones. Some turned to their carts. A few whispered, "Oh my God," under their breath. But no one moved. No one said a word. No one reached out a hand. It was the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it traps it. A silence made of fear, confusion, and something worse, indifference. The man's breathing was heavy, his chest rising with a strange pride, like he'd proven something. His anger didn't fade. It deepened, feeding on the silence that surrounded him. Because when people don't speak up, cruelty grows louder. The soldier watched, every second stretched long and heavy. He could feel his pulse slow, not from fear, but from focus. Training teaches you to read danger in the small details. The twitch of a hand, the shift of a stance, the look in someone's eyes before they do something worse. He saw the woman take a step back, her knees weak. She looked around, searching for something, maybe help, maybe just understanding. No one met her gaze. The man muttered again, shaking his head like she was the problem. His voice carried that tone, the kind that says, I can do this, and no one will stop me. The soldier's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight slightly forward. No sudden moves, just a quiet preparation. The kind of instinct that wakes up when someone crosses a line that should never be crossed. But he waited. He always waited for one thing, the moment that proves it's time. The man reached past the woman, shoving his items toward the counter, as if she no longer existed. The cashier hesitated, unsure whether to continue scanning or stop. Her hands hovered over the register. She looked around, hoping someone else would intervene, but no one did. The store's background sounds returned in fragments. A child whispered to his mother. A shopping cart squeaked as someone backed away. The music from the ceiling speakers played a soft pop song that now sounded hauntingly out of place. The pregnant woman bent down slowly, trying to pick up what she could. Her fingers shook as she reached for the fruit scattered across the floor. Each small movement looked like an effort, not just of her body, but of her spirit. You could see her trying to hold on to dignity while the world around her pretended not to see her pain. And still, the man stood there, tall, careless, breathing heavily, as if this moment belonged to him. He looked down at her with a smirk that didn't belong in a place so quiet. That's when the soldier's decision stopped being a question. It became instinct, but for now, he didn't move yet. He watched one more second, his eyes calm but unblinking. He saw what everyone else refused to see, the trembling in her shoulders, the fear behind her silence, and the arrogance in the man's grin. The distance between them was no more than a few steps. But in those few steps, an invisible line had been drawn, the line between cruelty and courage, and someone was about to cross it. The woman stood up, her breathing uneven. Her voice came out small, almost broken. Please, don't touch me. The man shrugged, rolled his eyes, and said, Then move faster next time. Those words were enough. Not because they were loud, but because of what they meant. Disrespect has a sound, and when it echoes in a room full of silence, it demands an answer. The soldier exhaled, one slow, steady breath. That was all it took. In that instant, everything that had been still began to move again. The store lights flickered faintly. Someone's cart rolled forward a few inches. And the soldier took his first step. The people in line didn't realize it yet, but the moment was already changing. The quiet man no one had noticed was about to remind everyone what strength really looks like. Before we talk about the moment he stepped forward, let's talk about silence, the kind that isn't peaceful. The kind that feels like a held breath before a storm. That's what filled the grocery store right after the shove. A silence thick enough to hear your own heartbeat. The soldier stood a few people back in line. He hadn't said a word, not since he walked in. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried a calm that didn't ask for attention, but demanded respect. Short hair, straight posture, steady eyes, the kind of quiet discipline that never leaves you, even after you take the uniform off. He wasn't just another man running errands. He was someone trained to see things others missed. Body language, tension, intent. He noticed everything. He saw the woman's trembling hands. He saw the man's clenched jaw, his chest puffed out in false confidence. And he saw everyone else, frozen, pretending they hadn't witnessed what just happened. He didn't rush forward right away. That's not what soldiers do. They calculate. They observe. They wait for the moment that matters, the one that decides whether action brings peace or chaos. And then that moment came. The thug, because that's what he was now, not just a man, shifted his weight, stepping even closer to the woman. Something in his expression made the air colder. It wasn't enough for him to push her. He wanted to remind everyone that he could. That's when the soldier moved. No warning, no words. Just one precise step forward, smooth, controlled, deliberate. In less than a heartbeat, his hand reached out and caught the thug's arm, not violently, not with rage, but with a grip that carried absolute authority. A grip that said, "You've gone far enough." The sound of contact was quiet, skin against fabric, but it cut through the silence like a command. The room froze. The cashier stopped mid-scan, her hands hovering over the register. A child nearby stopped crying. Even the music overhead seemed to fade, as if the store itself was holding its breath. The thug turned sharply, surprised. He wasn't used to being touched, much less stopped. His eyes narrowed as he tried to pull away, but the soldier's grip didn't move an inch. There was strength there, not just physical, but moral. It came from somewhere deeper, the kind of strength built through years of discipline and restraint. His fingers locked around the man's wrist, steady and unshakable. The thug's face changed. The arrogance cracked, replaced by confusion and then fear. Because when someone holds you like that without aggression, without anger, it's not just strength you feel, it's control. The soldier's voice broke the silence, low and even. "You don't push a lady." He paused, eyes locked on the man's. "Especially not one carrying life." The words were calm, but they carried the weight of command. They didn't sound like a threat, more like a statement of fact, one that didn't need to be argued. The thug tried to twist his arm free, his movements jerky and uncertain. But he couldn't. The soldier's hand stayed firm, his arm steady, his body balanced like a mountain that refused to move. He wasn't angry. There was no rage in his face, no tension in his jaw. Just focus, pure, unwavering focus. That was what made it so powerful. Anyone can shout, anyone can hit. But to stand calm in the face of disrespect, that takes something rare. The thug's eyes darted around, looking for support. But the crowd, once silent in fear, was now silent in awe. Every person in that line saw what was happening, and for the first time, they didn't look away. The soldier leaned in slightly, his voice still steady. "You think strength is about who's louder?" The thug didn't answer. His lips parted, but no words came out. He tried again to jerk his arm back, but the soldier's grip only tightened, just enough to remind him who held control. No shouting, no threats, just calm dominance. The pregnant woman took a small step back, her hand still on her belly, her eyes wide but no longer frightened. For the first time since the shove, she exhaled, a shaky, relieved breath. The soldier's other hand lifted slightly, signaling to her that she was safe. Just a small gesture, but it carried comfort, protection, and assurance all at once. The man in his grasp shifted again, frustration now turning to embarrassment. He hissed through his teeth. "Let go of me." The soldier didn't blink. "You will stand still," he said, voice calm as ever, "and you will apologize." The words weren't a suggestion. They were a command, the kind only someone used to giving them could say. For a long moment, no one spoke. You could hear the faint hum of the refrigerators again, the flicker of the store's lights, the quiet breathing of everyone watching. The thug finally stopped struggling. Not because he wanted to, but because he realized he couldn't win. There are some people you can't intimidate. You feel it the second you meet them, an energy that's beyond muscle or size. The soldier had that. He slowly released the man's arm, but his eyes never left him. It wasn't trust, it was control. Every part of his stance said, "I'm letting you go. Not because you deserve it, but because I've already made my point." The thug rubbed his wrist, read where the soldier's fingers had been. His jaw tightened. He wanted to say something, maybe to save face, maybe to fight back, but the words died before they reached his tongue. Because what could he say? He looked around the store, but the crowd wasn't on his side anymore. People weren't avoiding his eyes this time. They were staring at him and then at the soldier, and in every face he saw judgment. The kind that burns more than any punch ever could. The soldier took a slow breath, straightening up, his voice quiet again. "Next time try respect. It costs nothing." No one clapped. No one cheered, but the air had changed. The silence that had once been full of fear was now full of something else, admiration. The woman looked at the soldier, her lips trembling slightly. She tried to speak, but words wouldn't come. He gave her a small nod, almost like saying, "You're safe now." And just like that, the tension in the room began to fade, slowly, gently, like the calm after thunder. But the moment wasn't over yet. Because sometimes, when one man finds courage, it forces everyone else to look at themselves and ask why they stayed silent for so long. Before we talk about the moment the soldier spoke, let's pause on that silence. The kind that fills a room when everyone realizes something important just happened. No one moved, no one even breathed. It was as if the whole world had frozen, caught between fear and awe. The soldier still had his hand near the man's arm, not gripping anymore, just guiding, steady, unshakable, a quiet warning that didn't need words. He didn't shove him, didn't humiliate him. He simply moved the man back, one slow step at a time, until there was space again, space for air, for calm, for dignity. The man stumbled slightly, trying to reclaim his balance. His face had changed, the confidence gone, replaced by confusion and a flicker of shame. He avoided eye contact, his bravado shrinking with every second that passed. The soldier turned his head toward the woman. His voice dropped low, gentle, almost like he was afraid to break her. "Are you all right, ma'am?" It wasn't just a question. It was reassurance, a reminder that someone still cared enough to ask. The woman nodded slowly. Her lips trembled. Her eyes glistened with tears that weren't born of fear, but of something deeper, gratitude, relief, maybe even disbelief that someone had finally stepped in. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened as she tried to form words that simply wouldn't come. So she just nodded again, clutching the edge of her shopping basket like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The soldier gave a small nod back, subtle, calm, almost imperceptible, as if to say, "You're safe now." The man muttered something under his breath. "Mind your business." But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. His tone was hollow, stripped of all the arrogance it once carried. His shoulders slumped slightly, his defiance fading like a candle running out of wax, because deep down, he knew. He'd already lost. Not in the way people lose a fight. There hadn't been one. He lost in the way that cuts deeper. The way where everyone sees the truth about you, and you can't hide behind your voice anymore. The soldier didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just stood there, a wall of quiet strength, his eyes steady but not cruel. It wasn't about victory. It was about balance. About setting something right that had tilted too far toward wrong. Around them, the silence began to shift. The people in line, who had spent the last few minutes frozen in their own stillness, started to move again, but this time not to turn away. They looked up. Their eyes followed the soldier, the way he carried himself, the calm in his posture, the steadiness of his voice. They saw something they hadn't expected to see that day. Courage that didn't shout, didn't show off, didn't need a spotlight. The cashier's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the fallen items, setting them gently back on the counter. The older man near the back of the line straightened his shoulders. A mother held her child a little closer, whispering something soft. Maybe a lesson, maybe a promise. The soldier noticed all of it but said nothing. He wasn't there for recognition. He didn't crave attention or praise. To him, this was simple, something that needed to be done. Nothing more. The woman wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed, like she didn't want to make a scene. She whispered, "Thank you." The words were barely audible, but the soldier heard them. He gave the faintest nod again, his eyes softening just enough to let her know he understood. The man, the thug, shifted his stance awkwardly, mumbling again, but the words came out half-formed, unsure. Whatever power he thought he had melted away under the weight of quiet judgment surrounding him. He looked around, searching for someone to back him up, but every pair of eyes that met his were cold, disappointed. He wasn't feared anymore. He was exposed. He grabbed his cart roughly and stepped out of line, muttering curses no one cared to hear. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he walked toward the exit, trying to leave behind the humiliation that clung to him like smoke. But even as he disappeared through the sliding doors, the moment stayed. It lingered. Heavy, unforgettable. The kind of moment that presses itself into memory, soft at first, then permanent. The soldier watched him go, his expression unreadable. He didn't smirk, he didn't glare, he just let him go. His focus turned back to the woman. He bent down slowly, picking up the last of her groceries that had spilled earlier, the fruit, the loaf of bread, the carton of milk that hadn't burst. He placed them gently on the counter, careful not to make her feel small. Then he said softly, "You shouldn't have to deal with things like that." She smiled faintly, a tired, shaky smile that said more than words ever could. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also respect. Not just for what he'd done, but for how he'd done it. People began to whisper now, quietly, almost reverently. They weren't gossiping. They were acknowledging. What they'd seen wasn't loud or flashy. It was simple, human decency, rare enough to make the air feel different, and maybe, just maybe, that was the turning point. Not just for her, or for him, but for everyone watching. Because in that small grocery store, on that ordinary afternoon, people were reminded of something they'd forgotten, that courage isn't always loud and kindness isn't weakness. The cashier's voice finally broke the silence. "Ma'am, are you ready to check out?" Her tone was softer now, her smile genuine, as if she too had been changed by what she'd seen. The woman nodded, setting her groceries on the counter again, her hands steadier this time. The soldier stood nearby, not hovering, not leaving, just present. The line behind them moved slowly, quietly, but with a new kind of awareness. Each person seemed gentler, more deliberate in their actions. Even the air felt lighter, as though the tension that had suffocated the room had finally been released. The soldier didn't notice the looks people gave him, or maybe he did, and just didn't care. To him, this was nothing extraordinary. It was just what needed to be done. Before we talk about what happened next, the moment that truly defined this story, we have to stay here for just a second longer. In that quiet store, with spilled milk drying on the floor and a shaken woman finally breathing again, something invisible had shifted. Not just in the room, but in the people inside it. Because sometimes one small act of courage is enough to change how everyone else sees the world, even if just for a little while. Before we talk about the moment the soldier walked away, let's linger on the look in everyone's eyes. That quiet mix of respect and disbelief that comes after witnessing something real. No cheers, no clapping, just silence. A silence that felt full, like the air itself was holding its breath. The soldier stood there, shoulders relaxed now, the tension gone from his frame. He wasn't looking for acknowledgement. He wasn't waiting for validation. In his world, you did what needed to be done, and then you moved on. The woman still looked shaken, though less from fear and more from the shock of being seen. He helped her steady herself again, his hand gentle but sure, like he was handling something fragile. He didn't ask if she needed help, he just helped. Without saying a word, he picked up her grocery bag, the one she'd dropped earlier, and placed it neatly in her cart. The others watched, the cashier, the people still in line, the quiet crowd that had become witnesses to something larger than the moment itself. But the soldier didn't seem to notice them anymore. His attention was fixed on one thing, making sure the woman was all right. When she reached for her wallet, still trembling a little, he raised a hand. Calm, almost casual. "Don't worry about it," he said softly. Before she could protest, he handed the cashier a few bills, enough to cover her groceries. The cashier froze for a second, unsure what to say. Then, with a small nod, she took the money, eyes flickering between them, realizing she was part of something she'd remember long after this day ended. The woman opened her mouth as if to speak, maybe to thank him, maybe to insist she could pay. But the soldier shook his head gently. "Take care of yourself," he said. Then, after a small pause, "and your baby." The words were simple, but they carried weight, not just concern, but a kind of reverence. Like he understood what she carried wasn't just life, it was hope. And maybe, in a world that sometimes forgot how to protect what's fragile, that mattered more than anything else. She smiled. The kind of soft, teary smile that comes from gratitude too deep to express. Her lips trembled again, but this time not from fear. It was the kind of smile that says, "Thank you without sound, you saved more than you know." He nodded once more, then stepped back, turning toward the exit. No grand farewell, no dramatic glance over the shoulder. Just a calm, steady walk toward the door, the kind that said his job here was done. The crowd parted as he moved, not because he demanded it, but because respect has a way of creating space around those who earn it. Every step he took felt deliberate, grounded. There was no rush in him, no ego, just purpose. The sliding doors opened, letting in a gust of cold afternoon air. The sunlight hit his uniform just enough to catch the edge of his sleeve, a small gleam, brief and fleeting. Then he was gone, but the quiet he left behind stayed. For a moment no one spoke. People looked at one another as if to confirm that what they'd just seen had really happened. The cashier exhaled slowly, almost like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Someone whispered, "Who was he?" but no one had an answer. Because no one knew his name. He hadn't offered it, and no one had asked. That, perhaps, was the most striking part. He'd left behind no trace of himself. No introduction, no phone number, no hint of recognition. He didn't want to be remembered as a person. He wanted the act to be remembered, the choice to stand up when standing up was all that was needed. Before we talk about how the story spread, think about how moments like that travel, not through noise or headlines, but through whispers. Someone tells a friend, "You won't believe what I saw today," and that friend tells another. And somewhere between the retelling and the remembering, the story becomes a symbol. That's what happened here. By the next day, people in town were talking about the soldier in the grocery store. No one knew his name, but everyone knew his words. You don't push a lady. Especially not one carrying life. And later, take care of yourself and your baby. Those two sentences became the heartbeat of the story, short, simple but powerful enough to ripple through people's lives. At the diner the next morning, someone mentioned it to the waitress. At the gas station, a mechanic shook his head, saying, "Wish more people were like that." In small towns, stories travel faster than light, especially the ones that remind people what decency looks like. But it wasn't the confrontation they talked about the most. It wasn't even the push. It was how he handled it. Calm, respectful, firm, but not cruel. In a world where anger so often meets anger, he had done the opposite. He'd stood his ground without shouting. He'd defended without destroying. He'd reminded everyone that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply acts when it matters most. And that's what made people remember. Not the spectacle, not the tension, but the stillness, that moment when chaos could have taken over and instead, calm won. The woman came back to the store a few days later. Different time, quieter hour. The cashier recognized her immediately. They shared a smile, the kind that carries unspoken understanding. No words were needed. But when the woman left, the cashier noticed something. She walked taller. Not proud, not bold, just lighter. Like the world, for once, hadn't been as cruel as it could have been. And somewhere out there, maybe back at base, maybe on a different street, in a different line, the soldier went on with his life. He didn't know his story had spread. He didn't know people had started calling him the quiet hero. He wouldn't have liked the title anyway. To him, it was just another day, another moment where doing the right thing wasn't optional, it was instinct. Before we talk about what that instinct really means, pause here, in this afterglow of decency, this soft hum of human kindness. Because what he left behind wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder that true power doesn't shout. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't need recognition. It simply acts. When it matters most. And that's the kind of story that never really ends. Before we wrap up this story, remember, in a world that celebrates loudness, true courage often whispers. Real heroes aren't always wearing uniforms or standing on battlefields. Sometimes they're just people who choose kindness when it's hardest. Because strength isn't measured by power, it's measured by compassion. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video. Share it with someone who believes in quiet heroism, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the hidden strength in ordinary lives. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave.